A town is threatened with danger when a demonic coven forms following the discovery of a mysterious carcass. In a village in 1860s England, plowman Ralph is busy working when he hears the housekeeper's daughter calling out to him. After greeting the lovely teenager, he suddenly spots a black crow and pigeons gathering on the furrow. Upon investigation, he finds scattered fur and a deformed skull with one eye. Alarmed by his discovery, Ralph quickly reports it to Isabel, his employer, and the local judge, who dismisses it as animal remains. When the plowman suspects it might be from a fiend, the magistrate brushes him off. To prove he's telling the truth, the farmer invites him to the field to see the carcass. After the men leave, housekeeper Ellen spots Isabel's nephew arriving with a woman. She informs her superior about it, and they both gaze out the window. Before entering the house, Rosalind feels nervous about meeting her fiancé's aunt, unsure if she would be liked. However, her future husband Peter assures her not to worry. The couple enters the house, and the man introduces his fiancée to his aunt, announcing that they will be married the next day. However, Isabel looks at the lady disapprovingly. Despite Rosalind's efforts to please her, the housemistress judges her because she's just a farmer's daughter. Meanwhile, Ralph is surprised to find that the deformed skull is no longer in the area. This upsets the magistrate, who thinks that the plowman is wasting his time. Suddenly, the farmer spots Reverend Fallowfield catching a snake nearby. When the judge asks him about the remains, the curate hasn't seen them but notes that there have been strange folk passing the area from time to time. That night, the couple, the judge, and Isabel play cards. When Rosalind loses, the aunt informs Peter that his fiancée may not be a good fit for him. Because of this, Isabel arranges for the woman to sleep in the attic room, which hasn't been occupied for 5 years. Despite Peter's complaints, she reassures her nephew that Ellen will clean the area. Later, as Rosalind heads upstairs, she becomes concerned about Isabel's negative attitude towards her. In response, her future husband reassures her that their wedding will proceed as planned. Entering the attic room, the woman becomes scared upon learning that Peter's late uncle used to stay there. Peter then provides comfort, mentioning he will join her later, at 11 o'clock, once everyone is asleep. The couple shares a kiss before he leaves. Afterward, the engaged man joins the judge for a drink, which extends past 11 o'clock. During their conversation, the magistrate advises him to be wary of a woman's wiles, mentioning that he was once Isabel's admirer. After drinking, the intoxicated man suddenly throws the glass. Meanwhile, Rosalind hears someone by the door, assuming it's her fiancé. However, upon checking, she finds no one around. Suddenly, she hears a growling sound that sends her jumping back to her bed in fear. Just then, Peter arrives at the door and hears her screams. He tries to open it, but it's locked. The noise also awakens the judge and Isabel, prompting them to attend to the engaged man. Just as Peter is about to head out to get help, his fiancée stops screaming. However, upon entering the room to check on her, Rosalind yells at him instead. The judge then pulls the man aside, assuming that his presence terrifies the woman. Annoyed by the screams, Isabel intervenes and enters the attic to ease Rosalind. Realizing that his aunt is harming his fiancée, Peter wants to enter, but the magistrate only slaps him. Suddenly, Isabel exits the door, reporting that the woman scratched her face. Worried, the judge instructs Ellen to get Ralph and bring nails and wood for protection against the dangerous woman. Soon, the plowman arrives and helps lock the door. While Peter is against this, the magistrate relays his decision to send Rosalind to the asylum, believing she's not a good fit for him. The following day, the doctor examines Isabel, discovering she has a high fever. When the older woman inquires about her condition, the physician suspects she might have some distemper, but he plans to open her vein to confirm it. In the field, Ellen's children, Kathy and Mark, are playing with their friend, Angel, who discovers a weird claw in the furrow. At that moment, the asylum attendants arrive at Isabel's house. As they take Rosalind away, Peter is stunned when he notices her creepy gaze fixed on him. However, what shocks him even more is when he sees that his fiancé's hand has transformed into a claw. Later that day, Ellen, who has been tending to the sick Isabel, discovers that the housemistress is missing. She quickly informs Peter and the judge, but despite their efforts, they are unable to locate her. Meanwhile, Reverend Fallowfield is teaching the students about the Holy Writ. During the lesson, Angel passes a small bag to Anne, who is immediately disgusted when she sees what's in it. Her reaction grabs the instructor's attention, who takes the pouch and finds a claw inside. Kathy screams in shock while Angel swiftly retrieves it from the teacher. When Fallowfield asks her to give the bag up, she passes it to her friends. When he finally gets hold of it, he finds random items inside, revealing that the students had swapped the claw with something else. Meanwhile, Rosalind has escaped the asylum, prompting Squire Middleton to visit the judge and relay the information. He observes that something seems amiss in the village, linking it to what Ralph had discovered in the field. Upon hearing this, the magistrate insists that he inspected the furrow, but found nothing unusual. When Middleton suggests that it could be witchcraft, the judge remains unconvinced, as he doesn't believe in such things. When Peter overhears their conversation, the squire assures him that they're searching for Rosalind. When Middleton leaves later, the judge approaches the devastated man, who thinks that an evil entity is roaming around their house. The magistrate advises him to dismiss such thoughts from his mind. Despite this, the curious Peter enters the attic room that night to investigate. Inside, he notices flowers on the bedside table. He holds them close to his chest and lies down on the bed, closing his eyes. Suddenly, the wind blows out his candle, jolting him awake. Then, he hears a strange sound coming from beneath the wooden floor. Upon noticing the lifted plank, the man reaches inside, only to have his arm grabbed by a mysterious furry creature with a claw. He quickly pulls his arm back and hastily grabs a nearby chest, placing it on top of the wooden floor to prevent the mysterious creature from attacking him. Despite his fear, Peter goes back to sleep. Later, he wakes up, realizing the creature has emerged and is trying to strangle him. Reacting swiftly, he grabs a nearby sharp weapon to slice the furry arm. Hearing Peter's noise, the judge enters the room, only to find that Peter has severed his own hand. Alarmed by the accident, the judge calls for the doctor to assist Peter the next morning. During their conversation, the physician shares his witchcraft book with the magistrate, noting that Ralph's description of the remains aligns with the fiend in the book. Initially skeptical about witchcraft, the judge eventually becomes intrigued and decides to borrow the book. Soon, he boards his carriage to go to London. Before the magistrate departs, a worried Ralph requests that he stay in the village. The judge assures the plowman that he will return, appointing Middleton to take charge in his absence. When the magistrate is gone, Kathy turns to the farmer, informing him that he will be in charge of the household until Peter recovers. Later, in the woods, Mark informs his sister that he felt pain while holding the claw Angel found. Concerned for her sibling, the teenager immediately begins to pray for him. When Kathy informs Ellen about her brother's body ache, Mark reassures their mother that the pain is gone. However, the concerned parent insists on going to town to get some medicine. Before she leaves, the housekeeper reminds her daughter to attend the scripture class. Alone at home, Mark plays with the bones he had been hiding in his hand. Suddenly, he feels the pain again and sits down for a while to eat an apple. At that moment, two teenage girls arrive, casting strange glances at him. They then invite him to play with them, convincing him that they are going to do Angel's new game. Meanwhile, Kathy attends the class, noticing that only half of her classmates are present. When Fallowfield comments on Mark's absence, the student defends her brother, explaining that he's not feeling well. Suddenly, one student then speaks out, explaining that Angel couldn't attend because she had important matters to attend to. This information upsets Fallowfield, who exclaims that he won't tolerate such disrespect from the students. It turns out that Angel recruited half of the class to join her coven and participate in ritualistic games. Mark is lured into playing blind man's buff, but things take a dark turn when the ringleader strangles him to his demise. Meanwhile, Ellen is on her way home when the potion she's carrying suddenly bursts. Suddenly, a member of the coven appears, gleefully sharing that he, along with others, shut Mark in the woodshed. Confused, yet concerned, the housekeeper visits the mentioned location, only to find her lifeless son buried under a pile of wood. That night, Fallowfield is busy feeding his pet rabbit when Angel suddenly enters the room. She removes her robe herself, revealing her nightgown underneath. The Reverend immediately rises and scolds her for her behavior. Despite this, the teenager takes everything off to allure the man. When she invites him to play with them, the curate refuses, instructing her to cover herself up. As she insists, he pushes her away, asserting that he never wants to see her again. Hearing this, Angel curses at him. She informs him that Mark has already passed away, claiming that he had a demonic entity in him that she had to take out. The ringleader attends Mark's burial the following morning. As the curate speaks, Angel looks at him strangely, making him feel uncomfortable. Later, she turns her gaze to Kathy, who is starting to have body aches like Mark had. After the event, Fallowfield approaches Middleton, hoping to speak with him privately soon. However, when the curate leaves, Angel's dad informs the squire that his daughter has something to say about the Reverend. The teenager claims that Fallowfield called her back to class the other night and asked him to take her clothes off. She exaggerates, explaining that the Reverend threatened that she'd suffer the same fate as Mark if she didn't obey him. This information angers the squire, who thinks the story is true. Meanwhile, Ellen, Kathy, and Ralph pass through the woods on their way home. While walking, Kathy expresses her hope that the squire will soon find her brother's perpetrator. However, the plowman shares that he would feel happier if the judge were helping them. Strangely, Kathy feels a throbbing pain in her back, but she assures her mom that she's okay. Ralph then comforts her, calling her my love. He kisses her forehead, reassuring her that Mark's soul is at peace. After the farmer leaves, the teenager rushes to her mom, happy that the plowman addressed her affectionately. The following day, 2 male members of Angel's coven watch as Kathy picks flowers for her late brother. Suddenly they approach her and offer their condolences for Mark's loss. One of the boys then invites her elsewhere to pick better flowers. However, they soon bind Kathy, who screams. Despite her protests, the teenagers explain that they're playing a game where they pretend to be cannibals, and she is their catch. Reluctantly, she agrees to participate because she feels she has no other choice. Hearing Kathy's cries in the distance, a worried Ralph calls out her name in the woods, but is unable to locate her. Soon, the coven members lead their target to an unknown area. There, her other classmates appear, and they all bring her closer to Angel, who puts a flower crown on her head. Meanwhile, Middleton charges Fallowfield for ravishing Angel and suspects his involvement in Mark's demise. When the curate asserts his innocence, the squire dismisses him. At that moment, Kathy is taken to the ruined church. Angel then instructs everyone to kneel to perform a black mass. The coven member, Margaret, then takes over and recites a prayer to worship Behemoth, the furry fiend. Afterward, Angel tears Kathy's dress, discovering a patch of fur on her back. It is revealed that the coven targets the people who have been growing the demon's skin, which will have to be flayed to help the evil entity go back to its original form. Meanwhile, Ralph continues to search for Kathy and runs into Ned, who informs him that he saw Angel leading a crowd of teenagers heading in a particular direction. As part of the ritual, the sacrifice is violated and executed intimately before the furry skin is flayed. As the ringleader stabs her with sheep shears, Kathy starts to scream in pain, which Ralph hears in the field. The plowman follows where the sound is coming from and eventually finds the lifeless teenager in the ruined church. Meanwhile, Middleton takes Fallowfield to the woodshed where Mark passed away, hoping he'll confess. When the curate denies any wrongdoing, the squire shows him the axe, insisting it was used to harm the boy. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted when Ralph arrives, carrying Kathy's body. The plowman immediately suspects it was Angel's doing, along with the other teenagers. Middleton then asks his men to release the curate, believing his innocence. Discovering Kathy's demise, Peter grows concerned about their village and swiftly rides his horse to visit the judge in London. Upon arrival, he informs him that dreadful things have occurred in their town, all committed by children, suggesting it may involve witchcraft. Hearing this, the judge expresses his intent to return to the village, hinting to use drastic measures to stop the killings. Soon, the townsfolk learn of Kathy's unfortunate fate, prompting them to hunt down the witches. One morning, Margaret runs into the woods, pursued by angry villagers. Eventually, she is surrounded by the men, who throw her into the lake to test if she's a witch. Suddenly, Ralph, who heard the teenager's cries, intervenes, prompting the men to explain that if the teenager sinks, it means she's a practitioner of the dark arts. Thinking that the woman has sunk, the villagers leave, but the plowman stays behind. When he sees her floating, he rushes to save her, bringing her to Ellen for assistance. As the housekeeper wipes Margaret's body with a rag, she notices a patch of fur on her thigh. When she shows it to Ralph, the farmer recognizes it as the skin of an evil entity. Immediately, they call for the doctor, suggesting he remove it. Despite feeling unqualified for the operation, the physician proceeds when Ellen expresses her determination to save the teenager for Kathy's sake. The doctor successfully removes the skin while Ralph holds the woman still as she writhes in pain. After the procedure, the plowman suggests burning the skin, but the physician decides to keep it in a jar. Later, Margaret awakens and introduces herself to Ellen as the demon's child, insisting she must return to her master. However, when she tries to rise, the pain in her leg hinders her. When the coven member later recovers, Ralph visits her with flowers. However, she expresses that once her leg pain is gone, she will return to Angel. Hearing this, the plowman feels disappointed and tries to convince her not to serve the ringleader anymore. However, the angry Margaret accuses them of stealing the behemoth skin and threatens that they will pay for it. In response, Ralph warns her against making such threats, cautioning that the Lord will only punish her. But Margaret counters, claiming that her master is stronger. The coven member then invites the plowman to serve her lord. When she invites him to lie down with her, the farmer pushes her to the ground, expressing his regret for saving her. Ralph rushes outside and meets the doctor, informing him that Margaret is a hopeless case because she only talks about returning to her master. However, the physician raises an alarming concern, noting the daily disappearances happening in their village. He mentions rumors that the fiend has been spotted hobbling on one leg. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by Ellen screaming Margaret's name. It turns out that the teenager has fully recovered and run away. The doctor starts to worry, realizing that the teenager will likely report the removal of her master's skin to her fellow coven members. He fears the consequences he may face as a result. Suddenly, Ralph spots someone arriving from afar, who turns out to be Peter and the judge, whom he asked for assistance with. Ellen greets the men and sadly informs them that she lost her children to the demonic entity. Ralph then interjects, sharing about the furry skin they removed from Margaret. The doctor then shows it to the judge, who is convinced that it's sufficient evidence. He then leads them back to his carriage, revealing that he brought dogs to track down their enemy. When Ralph expresses concern about innocent people potentially being hurt, the magistrate implies that it's his responsibility to distinguish between the innocent and the guilty. Meanwhile, Margaret attempts to return to the ruined church, pleading with Angel to save her from the dogs chasing her. The ringleader then instructs the member to walk towards her, only to reveal that she set a trap for her. Angel becomes concerned about the dogs and believes that Margaret may have revealed their whereabouts to the villagers. She then checks her furry skin, only to find it removed. The member immediately explains that it was taken away from her, but the ringleader declares she's not worth saving. Angel abandons Margaret, stating that the dogs can devour her. The teenager attempts to escape, but the men and dogs soon arrive. Ralph, who's also there with the judge, assists in removing the trap from the member's leg. After this, they bring Margaret to a barn, binding her for questioning. The judge then asks about Angel's whereabouts and lets the dog bark at her when she doesn't answer. Terrified, she eventually confesses that they were supposed to meet in the ruined church for Behemoth's transformation. As the judge is about to leave, Margaret warns him that he's too late, as her master will become too powerful for him. While gardening, Ralph suddenly injures his leg. As he goes to wrap it with a handkerchief, he notices something unusual: fur growing out of his skin. Terrified, he realizes that his entire leg is covered with it. When he sees a black crow squawking, he immediately rushes back to the house, worrying that he will be pursued. The plowman then seeks assistance from Ellen, who invites him to join the judge who's initiating a great purge. However, the farmer refuses to go and prefers to hide in the attic room. That night, the magistrate gathers the townsfolk and leads them to the ruined church to destroy Angel's coven and Behemoth. Later, Ralph sees the people carrying torches in the field. Curious, he questions Ellen about who they are but hears no response. In a panic, the plowman closes the window and locks the door. He then sits in the bed and takes the bandage off his wound. Suddenly he hears a loud sound from the door, prompting him to hug his knees in fear. Soon, the townsfolk arrive at the ruined church, where a ritual is ongoing. Before intervening, Peter and the villagers observe Angel and her followers as they prepare the sacrifice, which is revealed to be Ralph. As the procedure begins, the coven members circle the bonfire. Eventually, a naked woman halts and passes a sharp weapon to the farmer, urging him to sever his limb as an offering to Behemoth. As the plowman is about to comply with the request, the judge brandishes his sword, catching Angel's attention. Realizing that the townsfolk found them, she screams and attempts to flee but accidentally impales herself on a man's pitchfork, leading to her demise. The magistrate then uses his weapon to scare away the other members. He then thrusts his sword into Behemoth's body and casts him into the fire, ultimately ending him. With the demon gone, Ralph's furry skin vanishes, finally breaking the curse.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.